Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a case that really sits at the absolute darkest intersection of psychology and true crime. We're going to be looking at the story of Mary Bell. Now, this isn't just a basic recounting of horrific events. It's really an anatomy of a childhood tragedy. We'll be taking an objective look at the chilling reality that our early environments and the care we receive or, completely lack, fundamentally shapes who we become.
So, the crucial question we really have to ask ourselves here is this: what actually turns an 11-year-old child into a serial killer? Through the timeline we're covering today, we're going to explore that incredibly dark, uncomfortable space where extreme childhood trauma meets early psychological development and how that specific combination can yield some truly devastating results.
Section 1. The Roots of Darkness.
Mary Flora Bell was born in northern England back in May of 1957, and right from the get-go, she was an unwanted child born into a profoundly broken environment. Her mother, Betty, was frequently absent, deeply neglectful, and entirely incapable of providing anything resembling a safe home. And the sheer volume of what Mary endured is just overwhelming. According to the source material, by the time she was only 5 years old, she had already experienced total rejection at birth. At age 3, she somehow survived being thrown from a first-floor window by her own mother. She was intentionally given sleeping pills. She was briefly sold to a mentally unstable stranger at a train station before a family member intervened. And most horrific of all, she was subjected to abuse by her mother's clients for money. This totally fractured environment absolutely laid the groundwork for her psychological descent. To really grasp the absolute maternal void that Mary was born into, you just have to look at her mother's reaction right at her birth. Betty allegedly told the doctors, "Take this thing away from me." We aren't bringing this up to be sensational, but to objectively establish an empathetic foundation for understanding the reality Mary lived in. She was a child operating entirely without any compass of love or safety.
Section 2. Ignored warning signs.
Now, all of that severe early childhood trauma didn't just magically disappear. It manifested outwardly in ways that were tragically completely overlooked. Mary exhibited these extreme, unpredictable mood swings. She was still bedwetting at age 9, which is a classic psychological indicator of severe distress. And at school, she was having violent outbursts, even attempting to choke other kids. As she reached age 11, her behavior escalated incredibly fast. If we trace the timeline for the summer of 1968, it starts on May 11th. Mary, along with her submissive 13-year-old neighbor, Norma, were involved in an incident where a 3-year-old boy was actually pushed off a 7-foot roof. And right after that roof incident, there was this massive, heartbreaking missed opportunity. Get this, Mary actually demonstrated choking a boy until he literally turned purple right in front of the police. And what happened? The police merely issued the girls a warning. Because they were so young, authorities just completely dismissed the severity of the behavior. And that left a highly dangerous child totally unchecked in the community.
Section 3. The first victim.
That escalation the authorities failed to stop finally culminated on May 25, 1968. 4-year-old Martin Brown was found dead in an abandoned Victorian house that was slated for demolition. He was found with foam and blood coming from his mouth, and there was an empty aspirin bottle nearby. But the autopsy showed absolutely no drugs in Martin's system, and investigators didn't see any obvious signs of physical violence. Because of that, the police mistakenly dismissed his death as a tragic accident or natural causes. Meanwhile, Mary Bell actually went over to Martin's aunt's house and secretly confessed that she knew what happened, but she disguised it as simply finding the boy.
Then, literally the very next day, May 26, which, by the way, was actually Mary's 11th birthday, she and Norma broke into the Woodland Crescent nursery and completely vandalized the place. They left behind 4 disturbing notes, including this truly chilling declaration, "I murder so that I may come back." Another note explicitly claimed responsibility for Martin's death. But yet again, authorities tragically dismissed the whole thing as just a childish prank.
Section 4. The second victim.
Just over 2 months later, on July 31st, a 3-year-old boy named Brian Howe went missing. His body was soon discovered hidden between these large concrete blocks, hastily covered up in weeds. His horrific injuries immediately pointed to a killer who was actively bullying and tormenting him before he died. And the forensic evidence at the scene caused the whole investigation to take a really sharp turn. First, they found small handprints and evidence of less physical force, which led to the shocking deduction that the killer was actually another child. Second, gray and maroon fibers were found on the victim, pointing directly to the killer's clothing. And third, an M was carved into the boy's body with a razor, which indicated some deeply disturbing ritualistic behavior.
Section 5. Catching the killer. So, this forensic evidence sparked a massive manhunt. Police questioned over 1,200 local children, which included Mary and Norma. And what finally drew the sharp attention of the police was that the two girls gave completely conflicting stories about where they were that afternoon. Let's walk through Detective James Dobson's brilliant logical deduction that broke this case wide open. Step 1. Mary tries to shift the blame, right? She claims she saw an 8-year-old boy hitting Brian. Step 2. To make her lie sound convincing, she adds this incredibly specific detail, claiming the boy was using scissors that were bent or broken. Step 3. Dobson immediately realizes the fatal flaw in her story. A broken pair of scissors was found at the crime scene, a detail that was never released to the public. Only the true killer could have possibly known those scissors were broken.
By this point, the pressure of the investigation is really mounting. Norma's parents actually called the police, which led to Norma completely breaking down during her interview. She confessed that Mary had taken her to a location called Tin Lizzie's Spot, pointed out Brian's body, physically demonstrated the strangulation, and chillingly admitted that the act of killing actually felt good.
But what's truly fascinating, and honestly terrifying, is Mary's reaction to being caught. At just 11 years old, she displayed a terrifyingly adult-like intelligence. When she was confronted, she accused the detective of brainwashing her, and she actually knew enough about the legal system to demand a solicitor to get her out of it. She held her ground entirely until the forensic match of those gray and maroon fibers to her own clothing definitively sealed her fate, which is what finally forced her confession.
Section 6. The Final Verdict.
On August 7, 1968, both girls were formally arrested and charged. And the trial revealed a really stark contrast between the two of them. Mary Bell was actually observed standing outside Brian's funeral, rubbing her hands together and laughing. In court, she was cold, she was calculating, and the jury ultimately convicted her of double murder. But in total contrast, Norma Bell was crying, clearly submissive to Mary's dominance, and the evidence proved she never physically harmed the boys at all. So the jury completely acquitted Norma of all charges.
Ultimately, this case serves as a really harrowing reminder of how a profoundly broken environment forged a broken child, who then ultimately broke others. It leaves us with this dark, provocative reality to ponder. No child is ever born a monster, for sure, but can horrific, unchecked circumstances create one? Thanks for walking through this incredible